The abandoned warehouse stood silent in the pre-dawn darkness, its broken windows like hollow eyes staring into the night. What Navy SEAL Jake Morrison found inside would shake the foundations of everything he thought he knew about duty, honor, and the chains that bind us all. Sometimes the most dangerous missions aren't the ones you're ordered to complete. They're the ones your conscience demands you begin. In a world where loyalty is currency and secrets are weapons, one discovery would prove that even the most elite warriors must choose between following orders and following their hearts. This is the story of a rescue that became a revelation, a mission that became a reckoning, and a truth that would challenge the very core of military justice. What started as routine reconnaissance would become the most important operation of Jake's life, not because of what he was ordered to find, but because of who he chose to save. Jake Morrison pressed his back against the cold concrete wall, his tactical gear barely making a sound as he adjusted his position. The warehouse district of Norfolk had been abandoned for years, but intelligence suggested it was being used as a staging ground for black market weapons trafficking. His mission was simple: gather intelligence, document everything, and report back to command. No engagement unless absolutely necessary. The Navy SEAL had completed dozens of similar reconnaissance missions throughout his 12-year career. At 34, Jake had earned his reputation through precise execution and unwavering discipline. His lean frame moved through shadows like water, every step calculated, every breath controlled. The night vision goggles painted his world in shades of green as he approached the main entrance of Warehouse 17. The heavy metal door hung slightly ajar, its hinges creaking softly in the Atlantic breeze that swept in from the nearby harbor. Jake paused, listening intently for any signs of movement inside. His earpiece crackled with static before his team leader's voice came through clearly. "Reaper 6, this is command. Status report." Jake touched his throat mic with practiced efficiency. "Command, approaching target structure. No visible hostiles. Proceeding with reconnaissance as planned." "Copy that, Reaper 6. Remember, this is intelligence gathering only. Do not engage unless compromised." "Roger that, command." Jake slipped through the doorway with fluid grace, immediately scanning the interior for threats. The warehouse stretched out before him, its cavernous space filled with shadows and the skeletal remains of old industrial equipment. Moonlight filtered through broken skylights, casting eerie patterns across the concrete floor. The air carried the smell of rust, decay, and something else, something that made his trained instincts prickle with unease. Moving deeper into the building, Jake documented everything through his tactical camera. Empty shipping containers lined the walls, their doors standing open like dark mouths. Scattered debris suggested recent activity, but whoever had been here was long gone. He was beginning to think this mission would be another dry hole when he heard it, a sound so faint he almost missed it over the ambient noise of the harbor. A whimper, distinctly canine. Jake froze, his hand instinctively moving to his sidearm. Animals in abandoned buildings weren't uncommon, but something about the sound triggered his heightened awareness. It came again, accompanied by what might have been the rattle of chains. Against his better judgment and direct orders, Jake decided to investigate. Following the sound led him deeper into the warehouse complex, past rusted machinery and through a maze of storage areas. The whimpering grew stronger, more urgent, as if the animal sensed his approach. Jake rounded a corner and stopped dead in his tracks. In a small clearing among the debris sat a German shepherd, its black and tan coat matted with dirt and what looked like dried blood. The dog's intelligent brown eyes fixed on Jake with an intensity that spoke of training and discipline. Around the animal's neck was a tactical collar, military issue, with identification tags that caught the moonlight. But it wasn't the dog that made Jake's blood run cold. It was the woman. She sat with her back against a concrete pillar, her wrists secured above her head with heavy chains that had been welded to metal brackets embedded in the concrete. Her uniform was torn and dirty, but Even in the dim light, Jake could make out the insignia of a Navy officer. Her head hung forward, dark hair obscuring her face, and she appeared to be unconscious. The German Shepherd looked between Jake and the woman, its tail giving a hesitant wag before it whined again, clearly distressed by its handler's condition. Jake's training kicked in immediately. He scanned the area for threats before moving closer, his weapon ready but not aimed. As he approached, he could see that the woman was breathing, though shallowly. Her uniform bore the rank insignia of a lieutenant commander, and there were signs of recent violence, bruises on her visible skin, torn clothing, and what appeared to be dried blood on her temple. "Ma'am," Jake whispered, not wanting to startle her, but needing to assess her condition. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" The woman's head lifted slowly, and Jake found himself looking into striking blue eyes that, despite everything she had endured, held no fear, only a steely determination that spoke of military training and inner strength. She blinked several times, trying to focus, before her gaze settled on his face. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice hoarse but steady. "Navy SEAL Jake Morrison, ma'am. I'm here to help." He kept his voice low and calm, the way he'd been trained to speak to hostages and trauma victims. She studied his face, taking in his tactical gear and insignia. "What's your unit?" The question surprised him with its precision and authority. Even in her current situation, she was maintaining operational security protocols. "SEAL Team 6, ma'am. Special Operations Command." Something shifted in her expression, a flicker of what might have been relief. "Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun, Naval Intelligence. My K-9 partner is Atlas." She nodded toward the German Shepherd, who had moved closer to Jake, but remained protectively near his handler. Jake knelt down to examine the chains that held her. The welding was professional, clearly done by someone with experience. These weren't restraints meant for temporary detention. They were designed to hold her indefinitely. "How long have you been here?" 3 days, maybe 4. Hard to tell without sunlight. Sarah's voice carried the matter-of-fact tone of someone giving a mission report rather than describing her own captivity. "Who did this to you?" Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That's classified information, Petty Officer Morrison." Jake looked up from the chains, meeting her gaze directly. "Ma'am, with respect, I need to know what I'm walking into here. If there are hostiles in the area, there aren't. Not anymore." The finality in her voice suggested she knew exactly where her captors had gone and why they weren't coming back. Jake pulled out his tactical knife and began examining the chain links more closely. The metal was thick, designed to prevent exactly what he was attempting. He'd need cutting tools, probably acetylene or thermite, neither of which he carried on a simple reconnaissance mission. "I need to call this in," he said, reaching for his radio. "No." Sarah's voice carried unmistakable command authority. "Absolutely not." Jake paused, his hand on the radio. "Ma'am, I understand you've been through trauma, but I need to get you medical attention and Petty Officer Morrison." The steel in her voice could have cut glass. "I'm giving you a direct order. You will not contact your command about this situation." "Not yet." The authority in her voice was undeniable, but Jake found himself in an impossible position. His orders were clear, and helping a captured officer should take precedence over reconnaissance. Yet something in Sarah's tone suggested there were complications he didn't understand. "Ma'am, I'm not sure I can." "What's your security clearance?" she interrupted. "Top secret, ma'am." "Mine is higher. Much higher." She leaned forward as much as her restraints allowed, her blue eyes intense. "There are aspects of this situation that go beyond what you can understand right now. I need you to trust me on this." Jake found himself caught between military protocol and the growing certainty that this situation was far more complex than a simple kidnapping. The woman before him carried herself with an authority that seemed to exceed her visible rank, and her knowledge of operational procedures suggested extensive experience in sensitive operations. Atlas whined softly and moved closer to Sarah, pressing his head against her leg in a gesture of comfort and loyalty. The bond between the officer and her K-9 Nine Partner was evident in the way the dog responded to her, never moving far from her side despite being free to leave. How did Atlas avoid capture? Jake asked. A ghost of a smile crossed Sarah's lips. He's very good at what he does. When they took me, he went aground. Been bringing me water from a puddle outside, and whatever food he could scavenge. He's been trying to chew through these chains for days. Jake looked at the German shepherd with new respect. The dog's loyalty and tactical intelligence were remarkable, even by military working dog standards. Atlas met his gaze steadily, as if assessing whether this new human could be trusted with his handler's safety. Ma'am, even if I don't call this in immediately, I still need to get you out of these chains. That means I need tools I don't have with me. Sarah nodded slowly. There's a maintenance shed about 50 meters north of here. Industrial equipment. You might find cutting tools there. You want me to leave you here alone? I've been alone for 3 days. Atlas, and I can manage a few more minutes. Her tone brooked no argument. Jake hesitated, every instinct telling him not to leave a captured officer unguarded. But Sarah's confidence and the presence of her highly trained Nine Partner suggested she wasn't as helpless as her situation might indicate. I'll be back in 15 minutes, he said, checking his watch. Take your time. Be careful. And Morrison? She waited until he met her eyes. Thank you. Jake nodded and began moving toward the exit, Atlas watching his every step with alert attention. As he navigated back through the warehouse complex, Jake's mind raced with questions. A naval intelligence officer with high security clearance, chained in an abandoned warehouse with precision welding, insisting that he not contact command. None of it added up to a simple kidnapping. The maintenance shed Sarah had mentioned was exactly where she'd said it would be, its doors standing open to reveal an array of industrial equipment covered in years of dust and corrosion. Jake's tactical light revealed cutting torches, welding equipment, and various hand tools scattered across workbenches. Most of it was old and potentially unreliable, but he found a portable acetylene torch that still had gas in its tanks. As he gathered what he needed, Jake's training demanded that he consider all possibilities. Sarah could be exactly who she claimed to be, a victim of circumstances beyond his understanding. Or she could be something else entirely, a foreign operative, a deserter, or someone involved in the very weapons trafficking he was supposed to be investigating. But something about her bearing, her knowledge of protocols, and the loyalty of her K9 partner suggested authenticity. Atlas alone was a significant indicator. Military working dogs weren't easily fooled, and their bond with handlers were typically forged through extensive training and shared experience. Jake made his way back through the warehouse, moving more quickly now that he knew the layout. The weight of the cutting equipment slowed him down, but his concern for Sarah's condition overrode his usual caution. When he rounded the corner back to where he'd left them, Atlas immediately alerted, recognizing his scent before relaxing as Jake came into view. Sarah looked up as he approached, and Jake was struck again by the intelligence and strength in her eyes. Whatever had happened to her, whatever complex situation he was walking into, she was clearly someone accustomed to command and comfortable with responsibility. Found what we need, Jake said, setting down the equipment. This might get loud. How loud? Jake considered the cutting torch and the echo potential of the warehouse. Loud enough to be heard outside, if anyone's listening. Sarah was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh options he couldn't see. Finally, she nodded. Do it. We'll deal with any consequences. As Jake set up the cutting torch, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to cross a line that would change everything. The simple reconnaissance mission had become something else entirely, and every instinct told him that freeing this woman would set in motion events he couldn't predict or control. But looking at the chains that held her, seeing the determination in her eyes, and the unwavering loyalty of her K9 partner, Jake knew he had no choice. Some things transcended orders and mission parameters. Some things demanded action regardless of consequences. The torch ignited with a sharp hiss, and Jake began the delicate work of cutting through the chains that bound Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun, not knowing that he was about to discover the most explosive military secret of his career. The acetylene torch cut through the first chain link with surprising ease, sending sparks cascading to the concrete floor. Atlas moved back at Sarah's silent hand signal, but remained alert, his ears constantly moving as he monitored for any approaching threats. Jake worked methodically, his hands steady despite the growing tension in his chest. "Almost there," he murmured, focusing on the final link that secured Sarah's left wrist. When the chain finally parted, Sarah immediately began massaging circulation back into her hands, wincing as feeling returned to her fingers. Jake moved to the second set of restraints, noting the angry red marks the metal had left on her wrists. "You need medical attention," he observed, cutting through the final links. "I need a lot of things right now, but medical attention isn't at the top of the list." Sarah stood slowly, testing her balance after days of enforced immobility. Atlas immediately moved to her side, pressing against her leg to offer support. Jake secured the cutting equipment and turned to face her fully. In the dim light, he could see that Lieutenant Commander Sarachon was younger than he'd initially estimated, probably early 30s, with an athletic build that spoke of serious physical conditioning. Even after her ordeal, she carried herself with the unmistakable bearing of someone accustomed to command authority. "Ma'am, I need to understand what's happening here. Who chained you up? Why don't you want me to contact command? And why do I get the feeling that this isn't a random kidnapping?" Sarah studied his face for a long moment, clearly evaluating how much she could or should reveal. "What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. By listening to it, you become part of an operation that officially doesn't exist." Jake felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. In his years with special operations, he'd been briefed into numerous black programs and compartmentalized missions. "Understand, ma'am. 3 weeks ago, Naval Intelligence received credible evidence of a conspiracy within our own ranks. High-ranking officers selling classified information and advanced weapons technology to foreign buyers. The operation involved at least a dozen personnel across multiple commands, including some at the Pentagon level." The implications hit Jake immediately. A conspiracy of that magnitude could compromise national security for years to come. "What was your role in the investigation?" "I was the lead investigator, working directly under the authority of the Chief of Naval Operations. My team identified the core players and developed evidence of their activities. We were preparing to move on arrests when someone leaked information about our investigation." Sarah moved slowly toward one of the shipping containers, using its wall for support as she continued. Atlas shadowed her every step, his attention divided between his handler and the warehouse entrances. 4 nights ago, I was contacted by someone claiming to have additional evidence about the conspiracy. The meeting was set for this location. When I arrived with Atlas, it was obviously a trap. 3 men were waiting, former military professional operators. They knew exactly how to neutralize me without causing permanent injury. Jake processed this information with growing unease. They were trying to silence you. More than that, they needed information from me. Specifically, they wanted to know what evidence we had collected and who else was involved in the investigation. The interrogation went on for hours. Sarah's voice remained steady, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders as she recalled the experience. "Did you give them anything?" Sarah's smile was cold and sharp. "I gave them exactly what I wanted them to hear. False leads, dead ends, and enough truth mixed in to make it believable. By the time I was finished, their entire network was chasing phantoms while we prepared to spring our trap." The pieces were beginning to fall into place for Jake. "So your capture was intentional?" "Partially. I expected them to make a move against me, but I underestimated their patience and planning. They were prepared to hold me indefinitely until they could verify the information I'd given them." Sarah reached down to scratch Atlas behind the ears, the dog leaning into her touch with obvious relief. "Where are they now?" "Gone, as of yesterday morning. My team moved on the primary targets based on the timeline we'd established. By now, most of the conspiracy has been rolled up, and my captors probably realized they were exposed." Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he understood the implications. "They left you here to die. That was certainly their intention. They couldn't risk killing a naval intelligence officer outright. Too many questions, too much heat. But leaving me chained in an abandoned warehouse would look like the work of foreign operatives or random criminals. The calculated cruelty of the plan struck Jake with full force. Sarah would have died slowly, her death explained away as an unfortunate consequence of dangerous intelligence work. Only Atlas's loyalty and resourcefulness had kept her alive long enough for Jake to find her. Ma'am, even if the main conspiracy has been exposed, I still need to get you to safety and medical attention. And I need to report this situation to my command. Sarah shook her head firmly. Not yet. There's still one more piece of this puzzle that needs to be addressed. She moved toward a pile of debris near one of the shipping containers, moving aside pieces of metal and concrete with purpose. After a moment, she extracted a small waterproof case that had been carefully hidden beneath the rubble. Insurance, she explained, opening the case to reveal a satellite phone and what appeared to be a high-capacity data storage device. Everything we collected on the conspiracy, plus additional evidence I gathered during my captivity. Recordings of conversations between my captors, details about their operation, and, most importantly, the identity of the person at the Pentagon who's been coordinating the entire network. Jake stared at the equipment with growing amazement. You managed to gather intelligence while you were a prisoner? They underestimated me, and they definitely underestimated Atlas. Sarah activated the satellite phone with practiced efficiency. My partner here is trained for more than just security work. He's equipped with recording devices and has been documenting everything that happened in this warehouse. As if understanding the praise, Atlas sat at attention, his bearing proud and professional. Jake looked at the German Shepherd with new appreciation, realizing that the dog was essentially a four-legged intelligence gathering platform. The person you're after, they're still active? Admiral Patricia Hawthorne, Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Intelligence. Sarah's voice carried a mixture of anger and disappointment. 28 years of service, impeccable record, trusted with the highest levels of classified information, and selling it all to the highest bidder. The name hit Jake like a physical blow. Admiral Hawthorne was a legend in naval circles, a trailblazer who'd broken barriers and earned respect throughout the service. The idea that someone of her stature could be involved in treason seemed almost impossible to believe. Are you certain? Sarah activated the data storage device and showed Jake a series of audio files and encrypted communications. Atlas recorded several conversations between my captors and their handler. Voice analysis confirms it's Admiral Hawthorne. She's been using her position to identify valuable intelligence assets and coordinate their sale to foreign buyers. Jake listened to several seconds of the recordings, recognizing the Admiral's distinctive voice even through the electronic distortion. The conversations were brief but damning, discussing payment schedules, delivery methods, and security protocols that could only come from someone with access to the highest levels of classified information. Why haven't you moved on her yet? Because she's not just selling information, she's been systematically compromising ongoing operations to protect her network. 3 missions in the past 6 months have been blown because she fed intelligence to hostile forces. Good people died because of her betrayal. The weight of the revelation settled heavily on Jake's shoulders. This was far beyond a simple corruption case. Admiral Hawthorne's actions constituted active treason with deadly consequences for American service members. What do you need from me? Sarah looked directly into his eyes, and Jake saw the determination that had kept her alive through 4 days of captivity and interrogation. Admiral Hawthorne knows that most of her network has been compromised. She's planning to disappear, probably within the next 24 hours. But she doesn't know that I survived or that we have the evidence to link her directly to the conspiracy. You want to set a trap. I want to end this properly. Admiral Hawthorne has caused enough damage to national security and cost enough American lives. She needs to face justice, and she needs to face it in a way that exposes the full scope of her betrayal. Jake considered the proposal carefully. Everything about this situation was outside normal protocols, but the evidence was compelling and the stakes were enormous. What's the plan? Sarah checked her watch and then activated the satellite phone. In 6 hours, there's a scheduled meeting between Admiral Hawthorne and her remaining contacts. They're planning to coordinate her extraction from the country and the final sale of a critical piece of intelligence, the complete operational plans for next month's Joint Special Operations exercise with NATO allies. The implications made Jake's blood run cold. Those operational plans would allow hostile forces to predict and counter American military movements, potentially compromising the safety of thousands of service members. Where's the meeting? Naval Station Norfolk, Admiral Hawthorne's private office. She's using her position and security clearance to conduct the meeting on base, knowing that it's the last place anyone would expect a traitor to operate openly. Jake realized the audacity and intelligence of the plan. By conducting treasonous activities in her official capacity, Admiral Hawthorne was hiding in plain sight while using her legitimate authority to avoid scrutiny. How do we get close enough to gather evidence? Sarah smiled, and for the first time since Jake had found her, it was genuinely warm. That's where having a Navy SEAL comes in handy. You're going to help me get into that building and document everything we need to bring her down properly. Atlas woofed softly, as if agreeing with the plan, his tail wagging slightly for the first time since Jake had encountered them. Ma'am, with respect, you've been chained up for 4 days. You need medical attention, food, and rest before attempting any kind of operation. What I need is to finish this mission. Everything else can wait. Sarah's voice carried finality, but Jake could see the exhaustion in her eyes and the slight tremor in her hands that suggested her body was running on pure determination. At least let me get you some basic supplies. Food, clean water, first aid. Sarah considered this, clearly weighing operational necessity against her physical limitations. 1 hour. We gather what we need, you get a full briefing on the operational details, and then we move to intercept Admiral Hawthorne. Jake nodded, understanding that he was crossing a point of no return. Once he committed to this operation, he'd be operating outside official channels, relying on the word of an officer he'd known for less than an hour and evidence that had been gathered through highly irregular means. But looking at Sarah's determination, listening to the recordings that proved Admiral Hawthorne's betrayal, and considering the lives that hung in the balance, Jake realized he had no choice. Some missions couldn't wait for proper authorization or perfect circumstances. Atlas, and I will handle reconnaissance, Sarah continued, beginning to gather her equipment. You'll provide security and technical support. We document everything, ensure Admiral Hawthorne can't escape justice, and prevent the sale of those operational plans. And if something goes wrong, Sarah met his eyes steadily. Then we make sure the evidence survives even if we don't. This conspiracy ends tonight, one way or another. As they prepare to leave the warehouse, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into the most important mission of his career. Everything about Sarah Chun and her story seemed authentic, but the magnitude of what she was alleging defied easy belief. Yet the evidence was compelling, her knowledge of classified procedures was genuine, and Atlas's unwavering loyalty spoke to the authenticity of their partnership. More importantly, Jake's own instincts, honed through years of dangerous operations, told him that Sarah was exactly who she claimed to be. Whatever lay ahead, Jake knew that the next few hours would determine not just the fate of a treasonous conspiracy, but the future of American military intelligence. And somehow, it all came down to a Navy SEAL, a captured officer, and her extraordinarily loyal K-9 partner. The abandoned gas station on the outskirts of Naval Station Norfolk served as their impromptu staging area. Jake had procured basic supplies from a 24-hour convenience store, energy bars, bottled water, and a basic first aid kit. Sarah had cleaned herself up in the restroom, and though she still showed signs of her ordeal, her alert focus made it clear she was ready for action. Atlas lay beside her, having wolfed down 2 cans of dog food with obvious relief. The German Shepherd's recovery was remarkable, Within hours of being reunited with adequate food and water, his energy had returned to near normal levels. His alert ears and scanning eyes showed he was ready to work. "Tell me about Naval Station Norfolk's security layout," Jake said, studying the tactical map Sarah had spread across the hood of his borrowed vehicle. "3 primary security zones," Sarah began, pointing to different sections of the base. "Outer perimeter is standard base security, guards, checkpoints, regular patrols. Middle zone covers administrative and operational buildings with card key access and occasional patrols. Inner zone is restricted areas, intelligence facilities, command centers, and senior officer quarters." "Where's Admiral Hawthorne's office?" Sarah indicated a building near the center of the base. "Building 7, 3rd floor. It's in the middle security zone, which means card key access and security cameras, but limited active monitoring during night hours." Jake studied the layout, noting sight lines, patrol routes, and potential exit strategies. "How do we get past the outer perimeter?" "We don't need to. You're going to walk through the front gate." Sarah pulled out a leather document holder from her gear. "These are your orders for a classified briefing with Admiral Hawthorne. According to these documents, you're delivering sensitive intelligence related to ongoing special operations." Jake examined the papers, noting official letterheads and what appeared to be authentic signatures. "These look legitimate." "They're legitimate. I prepared them 3 days ago as part of the original operation plan. The meeting is real. Admiral Hawthorne is expecting a Navy SEAL to deliver classified intelligence tonight." "She's expecting me specifically?" Sarah shook her head. "She's expecting a SEAL courier with the NATO operational plans. She doesn't know which specific operator will be making the delivery, which gives us the perfect cover to get close to her." The elegance of the plan became clear to Jake. Sarah had anticipated the need for a covert approach and built the framework for one into her original investigation. "What about Atlas and you?" "Atlas and I will enter through a maintenance access point on the south side of the building. There's a service tunnel that connects to the basement levels, originally built during the Cold War for emergency evacuation. It's not regularly monitored, and Atlas's training includes navigation in confined spaces." Jake looked at the German shepherd with renewed appreciation. "What kind of training does he have exactly?" Sarah's expression softened as she looked at her partner. "Atlas is cross-trained in multiple specialties: explosive detection, tracking, attack work, and intelligence gathering. He's equipped with micro-cameras and recording devices, and he's trained to navigate complex buildings independently if necessary." "Independently?" "Atlas can execute mission parameters without direct handler control. If something happens to me during the operation, he'll continue to gather intelligence and attempt to reach designated extraction points." Sarah's voice carried obvious pride in her partner's capabilities. Jake was impressed despite himself. Most military working dogs were specialists in 1 or 2 areas, but Atlas appeared to be trained as a complete intelligence package. "How long have you two been working together?" "For years. Atlas was specifically selected and trained for naval intelligence operations. There are only 6 dogs in the entire military with his level of cross-disciplinary training." This information added another layer of significance to the operation. Atlas wasn't just a working dog. He was a highly specialized intelligence asset whose training represented millions of dollars in investment and years of specialized development. "What's the timeline once we're inside?" Sarah checked her watch and began packing their equipment. "Admiral Hawthorne's meeting is scheduled for 0 to 100 hours. It's currently 22:30, which gives us 90 minutes to get into position. The meeting should last approximately 30 minutes, during which we need to document everything that occurs." "Who else will be at this meeting?" Based on the communications, Atlas recorded at least 2 other individuals. One appears to be Admiral Hawthorne's intelligence contact, possibly CIA or Defense Intelligence Agency. The other is described as the buyer, which suggests a foreign operative or arms dealer. Jake considered the implications of confronting multiple experienced intelligence professionals in a secure facility. "What's our extraction plan?" "That depends on what we discover during the meeting. If we gather sufficient evidence of Admiral Hawthorne's treasonous activities, we contact the FBI and Naval Criminal Investigative Service simultaneously. They'll handle arrests and secure the evidence. And if something goes wrong, Sarah met his eyes directly. Then we improvise. But, Jake, understand that this operation has to succeed. Admiral Hawthorne has already caused the deaths of American service members, and she's planning to sell intelligence that could compromise future operations. We cannot allow her to escape or destroy evidence. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on Jake's shoulders. This was no longer just about rescuing a captured officer or even stopping a conspiracy. American lives hung in the balance, and failure could have consequences that reached far beyond their immediate mission. "I'm ready," Jake said simply. Sarah nodded and began gathering her gear. Atlas will enter the building first to establish reconnaissance. I'll follow through the service tunnel and set up observation equipment in the adjacent conference room. You'll enter through normal channels and proceed to Admiral Hawthorne's office for the scheduled meeting. What's my role once I'm in the meeting? Play the part of a professional SEAL courier delivering sensitive intelligence. Let Admiral Hawthorne lead the conversation, but try to keep her talking long enough for us to document everything. The micro cameras will capture video and audio evidence of any treasonous communications. Jake secured his equipment and checked his sidearm, ensuring it was properly concealed beneath his dress uniform. What happens when the meeting concludes? You maintain your cover and leave through normal channels. Atlas and I will extract through the service tunnel and meet you at the predetermined rendezvous point. Then we contact federal authorities and turn over all evidence. The plan was simple enough to be executable, but complex enough to provide multiple contingencies. Sarah had clearly put considerable thought into operational details, suggesting extensive experience with covert operations. As they prepared to leave for Naval Station Norfolk, Jake found himself studying Sarah more carefully. Her knowledge of classified procedures, her access to legitimate documentation, and her confidence in handling a complex intelligence operation all suggested she was exactly who she claimed to be. But something about her bearing, the automatic authority in her voice, and the sophisticated nature of Atlas's training hinted at more than her visible rank would suggest. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Your security clearance, your access to resources, the level of Atlas's training. It all seems to exceed what I'd expect from a lieutenant commander, even in naval intelligence." Sarah was quiet for a moment, clearly considering how much she should reveal. "Jake, there are aspects of my position and authority that I cannot discuss, even now. What I can tell you is that this operation has the highest possible priority and that stopping Admiral Hawthorne is critical to national security." The non-answer told Jake everything he needed to know. Sarah was operating undercover identity, her real position and authority hidden beneath the lieutenant commander rank insignia. This realization added both credibility to her story and complexity to the situation. If Sarah held a position significant enough to require cover identity, then Admiral Hawthorne's betrayal was even more serious than she'd initially indicated. "Understood, Mom." They drove toward Naval Station Norfolk in focused silence, each lost in mental preparation for the operation ahead. Atlas rode in the back seat, alert and calm, seeming to understand that they were approaching mission execution. As they neared the base, Sarah provided final operational details. "Once you're inside, you'll have approximately 15 minutes before the other meeting participants arrive. Use that time to familiarize yourself with the office layout and identify potential recording positions." "How will I know when Atlas and you're in position?" Sarah showed him a small tactical radio, no larger than a coin. "Single-click transmission means we're in position and ready. 2 clicks means abort and extract immediately. 3 clicks means we need immediate assistance." Jake secured the radio in his ear, testing the connection briefly. "What's the signal for mission success?" 4 clicks followed by a 5-second transmission. Sarah smiled slightly. "That means we have everything we need to bring Admiral Hawthorne down." As Naval Station Norfolk came into view, Jake felt the familiar pre-mission focus settling over him. Every detail became sharp and clear, every contingency mapped out in his mind. This was what he'd been trained for. High-stakes operations where success or failure could have far-reaching consequences. But this mission was different from anything he'd experienced before. Instead of operating with his familiar SEAL team, he was working with a single intelligence officer and her K-9 partner. Instead of clear enemy targets, he was moving against a decorated American admiral. Instead of simple tactical objectives, he was navigating a complex web of treachery and betrayal that reached into the highest levels of military command. "Jake," Sarah said as they approached the base entrance, "whatever happens tonight, remember that we're fighting for something bigger than ourselves." Admiral Hawthorne betrayed her oath, her country, and the people who trusted her. She needs to face justice, and the intelligence she's planning to sell needs to be protected. Understand? And Jake? Sarah waited until he met her eyes. "Thank you for finding me, for believing my story, and for seeing this through." Most people would have followed protocol and called in their chain of command. Jake nodded, understanding that they'd moved beyond normal military relationships. They were partners now, bound together by shared purpose and mutual trust forged in extraordinary circumstances. As they pulled up to the base security checkpoint, Jake straightened his uniform and prepared to execute the most important deception of his military career. In his pocket were orders directing him to brief Admiral Patricia Hawthorne on classified special operations intelligence. What Admiral Hawthorne didn't know was that the intelligence being delivered was about her own treasonous activities, and that her distinguished naval career was about to come to a very public and disgraceful end. The security checkpoint at Naval Station Norfolk processed Jake's credentials with routine efficiency. The guard examined his orders, verified his identification, and logged his entry without question. Within minutes, Jake was walking across the base toward Building 7, carrying a briefcase that supposedly contained classified operational intelligence. The base was quiet at this hour, with only essential personnel on duty and minimal vehicle traffic on the main roads. Jake's footsteps echoed softly against the concrete as he approached the administrative complex, noting security cameras and patrol patterns with automatic precision. Building 7 was a three-story concrete structure typical of military construction from the 1980s, functional, secure, and completely lacking in architectural distinction. Jake entered through the main doors, used his temporary access card to reach the third floor, and located Admiral Hawthorne's office suite. The outer office was dark, but light showed beneath the door to the inner office where Admiral Hawthorne waited. Jake checked his watch, 01:45 hours. He was 15 minutes early, exactly as planned. Jake knocked twice and waited for the familiar voice to call, "Enter." Admiral Patricia Hawthorne stood behind her desk, reviewing documents by the light of a single desk lamp. Even at this hour, her uniform was immaculate, her silver hair perfectly arranged, and her bearing spoke of decades of command authority. She was smaller than Jake had expected, probably in her mid-50s, but her presence filled the room completely. "Petty Officer Morrison," she said, extending her hand with professional courtesy. "Thank you for making this delivery personally. I understand the intelligence is time-sensitive." "Yes, ma'am. As requested, I brought the NATO operational plans and supporting intelligence." Jake placed the briefcase on her desk, noting that Admiral Hawthorne's eyes immediately focused on it with intense interest. "Excellent. Please have a seat. We have a few minutes before my other appointments arrive, and I'd like to review the material with you to ensure I understand all operational details." Jake sat in the chair across from her desk, maintaining the professional demeanor of a SEAL courier while scanning the office for details. The room was spartanly decorated with military memorabilia, commendation plaques, and photographs documenting Admiral Hawthorne's distinguished career. Nothing suggested the betrayal that Sarah had described. In his ear, Jake heard a single click from the tactical radio. Sarah and Alice were in position. "The operational plans are comprehensive," Jake began, opening the briefcase to reveal documents that appeared authentic but were actually carefully prepared intelligence bait. They cover 3 phases of the joint NATO exercise, including special operations insertion points, communications protocols, and extraction procedures. Admiral Hawthorne moved around her desk to examine the documents more closely, and Jake caught a glimpse of something in her expression that made his blood run cold. It wasn't professional interest. It was the calculating look of someone evaluating merchandise for sale. "These are exactly what I need," Admiral Hawthorne said, beginning to photograph the documents with a small digital camera. The level of detail is exceptional. Jake watched in growing amazement as Admiral Hawthorne openly documented classified material, apparently feeling secure enough in her own office to operate without concealment. "Ma'am, those documents are classified top secret. Are you authorized to—" "Petty Officer Morrison," Admiral Hawthorne interrupted, her tone carrying absolute authority. "I'm the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Intelligence. My clearance level exceeds, you need to know. I'm authorized to handle these materials in any manner I see fit." The arrogance in her voice was stunning. Admiral Hawthorne wasn't even trying to maintain the pretense of legitimate intelligence work. She was photographing classified operational plans with the confidence of someone who believed herself untouchable. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Admiral Hawthorne quickly secured the camera and called, "Enter." 2 men entered the office, and Jake immediately recognized them as the type of professional Sarah had described: former military, experienced operators who moved with quiet confidence and alert awareness. The first was tall and lean with graying hair, dressed in an expensive civilian suit. The second was younger, broader, with the kind of controlled stillness that spoke of extensive combat experience. "Gentlemen," Admiral Hawthorne said, "this is Petty Officer Morrison, the courier I mentioned." "Morrison, these are my consultants, Mr. Chun and Mr. Rodriguez." Jake nodded politely while mentally cataloging details about both men. Chun appeared to be the senior partner, carrying himself with the authority of someone accustomed to command. Rodriguez remained near the door, positioned to control access and egress, classic security positioning. "The materials are exactly as promised," Admiral Hawthorne continued, indicating the documents spread across her desk. "Complete operational plans for next month's exercise, including special operations details that aren't available through normal intelligence channels." Chin approached the desk and began examining the documents with obvious expertise. "The quality is excellent. My clients will be very satisfied with this level of detail." Jake felt his stomach tighten as he realized he was witnessing active treason. Admiral Hawthorne wasn't just selling intelligence. She was conducting a business meeting to finalize the sale of operational plans that could compromise the safety of thousands of American and Allied service members. "The payment arrangements we discussed remain unchanged?" Admiral Hawthorne asked. $2 million transferred to your designated accounts within 24 hours of delivery, Chin confirmed, plus the additional resources for your relocation to our client's preferred location. Rodriguez spoke for the first time, his voice carrying a slight accent that Jake couldn't identify. "Our extraction team will be standing by. You can be out of the country within 6 hours of completing this transaction." Admiral Hawthorne smiled with obvious satisfaction. "Perfect. I've spent 30 years building my reputation and access within naval intelligence. It's time to realize the financial benefits of that investment." Jake struggled to maintain his composed expression while listening to Admiral Hawthorne casually discuss betraying everything she'd sworn to protect. The cold calculation in her voice, as she described monetizing her military service, was more chilling than any enemy he'd faced in combat. "There is one complication," Chun said, pulling out a tablet computer. "Our intelligence sources indicate that naval intelligence has been conducting an investigation into unauthorized information transfers. Do you have any information about this investigation?" Admiral Hawthorne's expression darkened slightly. "The investigation was led by Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun from my own staff. However, that situation has been resolved." "Resolved how?" Ms. Chun and her team became too curious about certain financial transactions and communication patterns. I arranged for her to be detained by associates of mine until the investigation could be properly redirected. Unfortunately, the detention became permanent when she refused to cooperate. Jake's hands clenched involuntarily as Admiral Hawthorne casually discussed ordering Sarah's murder. The woman sitting across from him had betrayed not just her country, but members of her own command who had trusted her with their lives. Rodriguez moved closer to the desk, his attention focused on the documents. What about her investigation team? Are they still a threat? Taken care of. I provided information that led to their capture during what appeared to be a routine intelligence operation. They're no longer in a position to interfere with our business. The scope of Admiral Hawthorne's betrayal was staggering. She hadn't just sold intelligence. She had actively orchestrated the capture and murder of American intelligence officers who threatened her operation. In Jake's ear, he heard 3 clicks from the tactical radio. Sarah needed immediate assistance. Jake stood up slowly, using the movement to mask his hand, moving toward his concealed weapon. Admiral, I need to clarify something about the operational plans. What kind of clarification? Admiral Hawthorne asked, but her attention was still focused on Chen's examination of the documents. The documents you're selling aren't actually classified operational plans, Jake said, drawing his sidearm and covering both Chen and Rodriguez. They're bait prepared by naval intelligence to identify traitors. The reaction was immediate and violent. Rodriguez lunged toward Jake while simultaneously drawing his own weapon, moving with the speed and precision of extensive training. Chen dove behind Admiral Hawthorne's desk, seeking cover while reaching for a weapon hidden beneath his jacket. Jake put 2 rounds center mass into Rodriguez before the man could bring his weapon to bear, the suppressed pistol making sharp coughing sounds that would be difficult to hear outside the office. Rodriguez went down hard, his weapon clattering across the floor. Chen had reached cover and was returning fire, forcing Jake to dive behind a heavy filing cabinet as bullets splintered wood and shattered glass around the office. Admiral Hawthorne had taken cover behind her desk, shouting orders that neither of the combatants could hear over the gunfire. Chen, this is over, Jake called out during a pause in the shooting. Naval intelligence has everything they need to bring down your entire network. Not possible, Chen responded, punctuating his words with another burst of gunfire. Sarah Chen is dead, and her investigation died with her. The office door exploded inward as Atlas burst through, moving with incredible speed and precision. The German shepherd immediately identified Chen as the active threat and launched himself at the man with devastating effect. Chen's weapon went flying as 80 pounds of highly trained military working dog drove him to the ground. Sarah followed through the door seconds later, her own weapon drawn and trained on Admiral Hawthorne. Admiral Patricia Hawthorne, you are under arrest for treason, conspiracy, and the murder of federal officers. Admiral Hawthorne stared at Sarah with obvious shock and growing fury. You're supposed to be dead. Reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. Sarah's voice carried cold satisfaction as she advanced toward the Admiral. 4 days chained in that warehouse gave me plenty of time to think about how much damage you've done to naval intelligence and how many good people died because of your greed. Chun groaned beneath Atlas, who maintained his grip on the man's arm while watching for any sign of continued resistance. The professionalism and precision of the dog's attack was remarkable. Chun was completely immobilized, but not seriously injured. Jake moved from cover and secured Chen's weapon while keeping his own pistol trained on Admiral Hawthorne. Ma'am, please place your hands on your desk and remain motionless. You have no authority to arrest me, Admiral Hawthorne said, but her voice lacked conviction. I'm a flag officer with 30 years of distinguished service. You are a traitor who sold classified intelligence to foreign buyers and arranged the murder of American service members, Sarah replied. Your distinguished service ended the moment you decided money was more important than your oath. Sarah activated a small recording device and began documenting the scene. Admiral Hawthorne, You are being arrested on the authority of the Naval Criminal Investigative Service and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The evidence against you includes recorded communications, financial transactions, and your own statements made during tonight's meeting. What statements? I haven't admitted to anything. Jake gestured toward his tactical gear, indicating the recording equipment that had documented everything. Admiral, we have video and audio recordings of you selling classified operational plans to foreign buyers. We have records of payments made to your accounts. And we have your own admission of ordering the detention and murder of Lieutenant Commander Chun and her investigation team. The color drained from Admiral Hawthorne's face as she realized the scope of the evidence against her. Those recordings won't be admissible in court. They were obtained through illegal surveillance. They were obtained through a legally authorized intelligence operation investigating treason within naval intelligence, Sarah corrected. Every aspect of this investigation was conducted with proper authority and oversight. Atlas released his grip on Chun, but remained positioned to immediately re-engage if necessary. The man's arm was bleeding, but not seriously injured, and his eyes showed the resignation of someone who understood that resistance was futile. The financial transfers, the communication intercepts, the documented meetings, it's all going to come out in federal court, Sarah continued. But more importantly, the families of the service members who died because of your betrayal are going to know exactly why their loved ones never came home. Admiral Hawthorne's composure finally cracked, and Jake saw tears of rage and frustration in her eyes. You have no idea what it's like to spend 30 years watching incompetent politicians make decisions that get good people killed. I spent 3 decades following orders from people who had never heard a shot fired in anger. So, you decided to start working for the other side? Jake asked. I decided to stop being naive about how the world actually works. Intelligence is power, and power has value. I simply chose to realize that value instead of pretending that patriotism pays the bills. The cynicism in Admiral Hawthorne's voice was staggering, but Jake recognized the rationalization pattern of someone who had convinced themselves that betrayal was justified by disappointment and greed. Sarah activated her satellite phone and began placing calls to federal authorities. This is Commander Chun, Naval Intelligence. I need immediate response teams at Naval Station Norfolk, Building 7, for the arrest of flag officer suspects in a treason investigation. As Sarah coordinated with federal authorities, Jake secured both prisoners and began documenting the evidence scattered around the office. The operation had been successful beyond their most optimistic projections. They had not only prevented the sale of classified intelligence, but had gathered irrefutable evidence of Admiral Hawthorne's treasonous activities. But, looking at the woman who had betrayed everything she'd sworn to protect, Jake felt no satisfaction in their success. Admiral Hawthorne's fall from decorated officer to treasonous criminal was a reminder that even the most trusted individuals could be corrupted by greed and disappointment. The sound of approaching sirens indicated that federal authorities were responding to Sarah's call. Within minutes, the building would be surrounded by FBI agents and Naval Criminal Investigative Service personnel, ready to take custody of prisoners and secure evidence. Atlas moved to Sarah's side, pressing against her leg in the gesture of comfort and support that Jake had observed during their first meeting. The bond between the intelligence officer and her K-9 partner had been tested by 4 days of captivity and an extremely dangerous operation, but it remained unbreakably strong. It's over, Sarah said, looking at Jake with obvious relief and gratitude. Admiral Hawthorne's network is finished, the classified intelligence is secure, and justice will be served. Jake nodded, understanding that they had accomplished something significant not just for national security, but for the principle that no one was above the law, not even decorated admirals with decades of distinguished service. 6 weeks later, Jake Morrison sat in a secure briefing room at the Pentagon, still trying to process everything that had unfolded since that night at Naval Station Norfolk. The investigation into Admiral Hawthorne's treason had expanded far beyond anyone's initial expectations, revealing a network of corruption that reached into multiple branches of the military and several intelligence agencies. The door opened, and Sarah Chun entered, but she was no longer wearing the lieutenant commander insignia Jake had first seen. Instead, her uniform bore the silver eagles of a full colonel, and the authorizations on her identification indicated a security clearance level that exceeded anything Jake had imagined possible. "Colonel Chun," Jake said, standing as she entered. "Please sit down, Jake." "And it's still Sarah." She took the seat across from him, and Atlas immediately settled at her side. The German shepherd looked remarkably recovered from their ordeal, his coat shining with health, and his alert demeanor suggesting he was ready for whatever mission might come next. "I think you owe me an explanation about exactly who you are," Jake said. Sarah smiled, and Jake realized this was the first time he'd seen her genuinely relaxed since their first meeting. "You're right. The truth is that I'm not naval intelligence, at least not in the traditional sense. I work for a joint task force that investigates corruption and security breaches within the intelligence community itself, like internal affairs for spies. Something like that. My real rank is colonel, but I operate undercover identities depending on the requirements of specific investigations. The lieutenant commander Chin identity was created specifically to investigate Admiral Hawthorne's network." Jake processed this information, understanding now why Sarah had possessed such extensive authority and resources. "How long had you been investigating her?" 8 months. We first became suspicious when several high-value operations were compromised in ways that suggested inside information. The pattern pointed to someone with access to the highest levels of intelligence planning. Sarah pulled out a tablet and showed Jake a comprehensive organizational chart that revealed the full scope of Admiral Hawthorne's network. 37 individuals across 6 different agencies, including 2 other flag officers, multiple senior enlisted personnel, and several civilian contractors. The financial transactions alone exceeded $15 million over 3 years. The scale was staggering. Admiral Hawthorne hadn't been operating as a lone criminal. She had built an entire organization dedicated to selling American military secrets to the highest bidder. What happened to the other conspirators? All arrested within 72 hours of Admiral Hawthorne's capture. The evidence we gathered that night provided enough leverage to roll up the entire network before anyone could escape or destroy evidence. Jake looked at the photographs of arrested personnel, recognizing several names from prestigious military commands. The damage assessment must be enormous. It is, but it could have been much worse if Admiral Hawthorne had succeeded in selling those NATO operational plans. Our analysis indicates that sale would have compromised the safety of over 10,000 American and Allied service members. The weight of what they had prevented settled heavily on Jake's shoulders. Their success hadn't just been about arresting a traitor. It had been about protecting thousands of lives that would have been at risk if Admiral Hawthorne's final transaction had been completed. "There's something else you need to know," Sarah continued, her expression becoming more serious. "The investigation into Admiral Hawthorne revealed something that changes everything about why you found me in that warehouse." Jake waited, sensing that whatever Sarah was about to tell him would be significant. "Admiral Patricia Hawthorne is my father." The revelation hit Jake like a physical blow. For several seconds, he could only stare at Sarah, trying to reconcile this information with everything he knew about the case. "Your father?" Admiral Patricia Hawthorne's real name is Admiral Patrick Hawthorne. The Patricia identity was part of a deep cover operation he began 15 years ago, initially to investigate foreign intelligence penetration of American military commands. But somewhere along the way, the mission changed him, and he decided that patriotism was less profitable than treachery. Jake struggled to understand the implications. "So, when you were investigating the treason network," "I was investigating my own father, though I didn't know his real identity until after his arrest. The Joint Task Force had carefully compartmentalized information to prevent any conflicts of interest." The personal dimension of Sarah's sacrifice became clear to Jake. She hadn't just been risking her life to stop a traitor. She had been risking everything to bring her own father to justice. How did you find out? During the post-arrest interrogation, Admiral Hawthorne demanded to speak with me privately. That's when he revealed his real identity and our relationship. Sarah's voice remained steady, but Jake could see the emotional cost of the revelation in her eyes. What did he say? That he was proud of my professionalism and that he hoped I would understand why he had chosen money over principle. He actually seemed to believe that I would approve of his decision to betray everything we both swore to protect. The callousness of Admiral Hawthorne's attitude was stunning. Even facing arrest for treason, he had expected his daughter to understand and support his betrayal. I can't imagine what that conversation was like. Sarah was quiet for a moment, clearly reliving a painful memory. The hardest part was realizing that the father I had respected my entire life had died years ago, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. The man who taught me about honor and duty had sold both for money. Atlas sensed Sarah's emotional state and moved closer, pressing his head against her hand in a gesture of comfort and support. The bond between them had clearly deepened through their shared ordeal and continued to provide strength for both. What happens now? Admiral Hawthorne and his co-conspirators will face court-martial for treason, conspiracy, and the murder of federal officers. The evidence is overwhelming, and the sentences will reflect the magnitude of their betrayal. Jay considered the legal proceedings that would follow. Will your relationship be a factor in the case? Actually, it strengthens the prosecution's position. The fact that I pursued the investigation, even after discovering the personal connection, demonstrates the objective nature of our evidence. My father can't claim that the case against him is motivated by anything other than his own criminal actions. Sarah activated her tablet and showed Jake another document, a comprehensive report on the intelligence damage caused by Admiral Hawthorne's network. This is the real cost of his betrayal. 7 American intelligence officers killed when their covers were blown. 12 special operations missions compromised, resulting in the deaths of 31 service members. 3 allied intelligence services that will never trust us again because their operations were exposed. The human cost was staggering. Admiral Hawthorne's greed had resulted in the deaths of dozens of American service members and allies, each representing families destroyed and missions that would never be completed. But there's also something positive that came from this investigation, Sarah continued, pulling up a different section of the report. The methods we developed to identify and track corruption within the intelligence community are being implemented across all branches of the military. What happened with my father will be much harder to accomplish in the future. Jake nodded, understanding that every major security failure led to improvements in procedures and oversight. What about Atlas? What happens to him? Sarah smiled and scratched the German Shepherd behind the ears. Atlas is being awarded the Defense Distinguished Service Medal for his role in the investigation. His recordings and intelligence gathering were crucial to building the case against Admiral Hawthorne's network. A medal for a dog? Atlas isn't just a dog. He's a military service member who performed above and beyond the call of duty. His loyalty and professionalism under extreme circumstances deserve recognition. Jake looked at Atlas with new appreciation. The German Shepherd had demonstrated not just loyalty to his handler, but genuine heroism in the face of dangerous circumstances. And what about you? What's next? Sarah's expression became thoughtful. I've been offered command of the joint task force that investigated this case. It would mean expanding our efforts to identify and prevent future security breaches across all intelligence agencies. That sounds like an important mission. It is, but it's also a mission that will require absolute dedication and probably years of my life. I'd be giving up any chance of a normal military career or personal life. Jake understood the weight of the decisions Sarah was facing. Success in the intelligence community often required sacrifices that ordinary people couldn't fully appreciate. What are you going to do? Sarah stood and moved to the window, looking out at the Pentagon's central courtyard where hundreds of military and civilian personnel moved about their daily duties. My father betrayed his oath because he lost faith in the system he swore to protect. He convinced himself that patriotism was naive and that honor was a luxury he couldn't afford. She turned back to Jake, her expression resolute. I'm going to spend whatever time I have left in uniform proving him wrong. Jake felt a surge of respect for Sarah's commitment. Despite everything she had endured, despite the personal betrayal by her own father, she remained dedicated to the principles that Admiral Hawthorne had abandoned. The Joint Task Force position, you're going to take it? Yes. Someone needs to make sure that what my father did can never happen again. Someone needs to stand guard over the Guardians themselves. Atlas woofed softly, as if expressing his approval of the decision, and Sarah smiled as she looked down at her partner. Atlas and I have been through too much together to consider any other option. We're a team, and we have work to do. Jake stood and extended his hand to Sarah. It's been an honor serving with you, Colonel Chun. The honor was mine, Jake. What you did that night, choosing to help rather than just following protocol. That's what real leadership looks like. As they shook hands, Jake realized that his chance encounter with a chained officer and her K-9 partner had changed more than just the course of a single investigation. It had reminded him why he had chosen to serve his country and why that choice remained worthwhile despite the betrayals and disappointments that inevitably accompanied military service. Will I see you again? Sarah smiled. In our line of work, paths have a way of crossing again when you least expect it. Take care of yourself, Jake. As Sarah and Atlas left the briefing room, Jake remained by the window, watching military personnel go about their duties with renewed appreciation for their dedication and sacrifice. Admiral Hawthorne's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also revealed the strength of the institutions and individuals who remained committed to protecting American interests. Somewhere in the Pentagon's vast complex, federal prosecutors were preparing cases against 37 individuals who had chosen money over country. But in the same building, thousands of others continued to serve with honor and integrity, proving that Admiral Hawthorne's cynicism was wrong. The system worked not because it was perfect, but because people like Sarah Chun and her remarkable K-9 partner were willing to risk everything to keep it functioning properly. Their sacrifice and dedication ensured that future generations of service members could serve with confidence that their leadership remained worthy of trust. Jake gathered his materials and prepared to return to his own unit, knowing that he would carry the lessons of that night with him for the rest of his military career. Sometimes the most important missions weren't the ones you were ordered to complete. They were the ones your conscience demanded you begin. In a secure facility outside Washington, Admiral Patrick Hawthorne sat in solitary confinement, awaiting trial for treason against the United States. His distinguished military career was over, his reputation destroyed, and his relationship with his daughter irreparably damaged. But at Naval Station Norfolk, Building 7 had been thoroughly cleaned and returned to normal operations. New security procedures were in place, and the intelligence work that Admiral Hawthorne had betrayed continued under the leadership of officers who understood that some things were worth more than money. The system endured, protected by people willing to sacrifice everything to keep faith with their oath of service. And in the end, that was all the victory anyone could ask for.